Daily Words of God.
If you truly wish to gain the way of eternal life, and if you are voracious in your search for it, then first answer this question: where is God today? Perhaps you'll reply that God lives in heaven. Of course, He wouldn't be living in your home, would He? Perhaps you might say, God obviously lives among all things. Or you might say that God lives in each person's heart, or that God is in the spiritual world. I don't deny any of this, but I must clarify the issue. It isn't totally correct to say that God lives in the heart of man, but neither is it completely wrong. That is because, among believers in God, there are those whose belief is true and those whose belief is false. There are those of whom God approves and those of whom He disapproves. There are those who please Him and those whom He detests. And there are those whom He makes perfect and those whom He eliminates. And so I say that God lives in but a few people's hearts. And these people are undoubtedly those who truly believe in God, those of whom God approves, those who please Him, and those whom He makes perfect. They are the ones who are led by God. Since they are led by God, so they are the people who have already heard and seen God's way of eternal life. Those whose belief in God is false, those who are not approved by God, those who are despised by God, those who are eliminated by God, they are bound to be rejected by God, are bound to remain without the way of life, and are bound to remain ignorant of where God is. In contrast, those in whose hearts God lives know where He is. They are the people unto whom God bestows the way of eternal life, and they are the ones who follow God. Do you know now where God is? God is both in the heart of man and at man's side. He is not only in the spiritual world and above all things, but even more on the earth upon which man exists. And so the arrival of the last days has taken the steps of God's work into new territory. God holds sovereignty over all things in the universe, and He is the mainstay of man in his heart, and moreover, He exists among man. Only in this way can He bring the way of life to mankind, and bring man into the way of life. God has come to earth and lives among man, so that man may gain the way of life, and so that man may exist. At the same time, God also commands all things in the universe, so that they might cooperate with His management among man. And so, if you only acknowledge the doctrine that God is in heaven and in the heart of man, yet do not acknowledge the truth of God's existence among man, then you shall never gain life, and shall never gain the way of truth. God Himself is life and the truth, and His life and truth coexist. Those who are incapable of gaining the truth shall never gain life. Without the guidance, support, and provision of the truth, you shall only gain letters, doctrines, and moreover, death. God's life is ever present, and His truth and life coexist. If you cannot find the source of truth, then you will not gain the nourishment of life. If you cannot gain the provision of life, then you will surely have no truth. And so, apart from imaginations and conceptions, the entirety of your body shall be nothing but flesh, your stinking flesh. Know that the words of books do not count as life. The records of history cannot be fated as the truth, and the doctrines of the past cannot serve as an account of words presently spoken by God. Only that which is expressed by God when He comes to earth and lives among man is the truth, life, God's will, and His current way of working. If you apply the records of words spoken by God during past ages to today, then you are an archaeologist. And the best way of describing you is as an expert on historical heritage. That is because you always believe in traces of the work that God did in times gone by. Only believe in the shadow of God left from when He previously worked among man. And only believe in the way that God gave to His followers in former times. You do not believe in the direction of God's work today. Do not believe in the glorious countenance of God today. And do not believe in the way of truth presently expressed by God. And so you are undeniably a daydreamer who is completely out of touch with reality. If now you still cling to words that are incapable of bringing life to man, then you are a hopeless piece of dead wood, for you are too conservative, too intractable, too impervious to reason.
God Himself, His life and truth, and His life and truth are intertwined. Those who gain not His truth gain not life without receiving the guidance and support of His truth. Left with mere letters and doctrines, man is left with death. God's life and truth are intertwined and ever present. If you know not the source of truth, you receive not the nourishment of life. Enduring and everlasting truth. This truth is the path that man must walk to gain life. It is the only path to knowing God and receiving His approval. If you gain not the provision of life, you surely possess not the truth. You are merely putrid flesh, just empty imagination and fruitless ideation. Christ of the last days brings life expressing